A few years ago, I left pretty much everything behind to explore the unknown. So with my laptop in one hand and my backpack in the other, I've been working all the way from the mountaintops in Georgia, the night train through Kazakstan, and the jungle in Sri Lanka, which wasn't my best idea. But to understand why I went on this digital nomad journey in the first place, let me just back the tape to 2017. So first, just to give you some context. So I was a high school dropout who ended up breaking the idea of who can become successful. So in 2017, I was running an award-nominated company within the music industry, supported by Angel Hayes and Wu-Tang Clan. I was living in the city of my dreams, Barcelona, with a partner in a beautiful apartment. So objectively, I had it all pretty much figured out. But in a matter of a few months, I lost it all. So one morning, during an extremely hot summer in Barcelona, I woke up with severe stomach cramps. At first, I thought, oh, it's gonna go away, it's gonna pass after a day or two. But they never did. A few months later, I was diagnosed with a chronic disease called GERD. I pretty much lost my ability to swallow my own food. And as a result, I became so deeply malnourished that I could hardly use my legs. And the consequence of being seriously ill were that my company started to fall apart. The relationship ended, and I moved out of our apartment and into a hospital. In the midst of this chaos, during New Year's Eve, I got a call saying that my grandpa had passed away in a massive stroke. This was a pivotal moment, I would say, in my life where everything I thought I knew just shifted. I was navigating through a rough breakup and losing one of the most important people in my life. So me and my grandpa had a very special bond and very much shared that desire to explore the unknown. So when he was young and didn't have any money to travel, he took matter in his own hands and crossed the Atlantic Ocean on a cargo ship to get to South America. But he had to put aside his passion for traveling for over 40 years because obviously he had bills to pay and kids to feed and a job to maintain. So when he finally reached his pension and thought that he could finally continue the adventure he hoped for, he passed away. And this was a game-changing moment in my journey where everything I thought was important completely melted. Yes, I was fighting a horrible disease, but it enabled me to look at my life with clearer eyes. Losing my grandpa and going through a lot of grief at that time made me realize that I want to build my life around something that he could be proud of, something beyond prestige and accomplishments, something that truly fueled my soul. And for me, the answer was simple. I wanted to become a traveling digital nomad. So let me fast forward 7 months. So 7 months later, I had just landed a job as a digital marketer at this tech startup. And the first thing I did was walk up to RF, the CEO of this company, and I asked him, so would you mind if I worked from a coffee shop somewhere else? And he was like, cool, that's totally fine. And I replied with, okay, but what if I do it from, say, Kazakhstan? And he looked at me and said, well, maybe not that far. So this startup has a thing called a happiness philosophy, which basically means that there's no business if people aren't happy, which was one of the reasons for why I jumped on board in the first place. After persistently trying to convince him, Arif eventually got back to me and he said, okay, I had some thinking, and if this really makes you happy, then let's give it a go. Let's try it out. So guess what I did? I got home that day. I packed my bags, bought the cheapest one-way ticket I could find, and never looked back. So you might wonder, how did you get there? Getting to that point, I would say when my mindset shifted, things started to shift in the external as well. I met a doctor in gastroenterology. He was the first one who refused to give up until my symptoms were minimized. I started visualizing a life working from the road. And even through my worst days, I made small but profound choices that would lead me to that dream. And at first, those choices were simply having the strength to get out of bed in the morning, having the strength to walk to the mailbox and back. And 8 months later, I landed a new dream job and worked with the world as my office. So now, after years of working out in the world without a home, I realized, first of all, how incredibly privileged I am to possess a powerful passport and be able to travel this seamlessly. But that's another TED Talk. So one memory that really stuck was working from Kazakhstan for a month. So I've just spent a weekend in a remote village with 20 strangers. The remote village was called Sati. I have a photo of that here. So in the evening, me and 6 Kazakh women were sharing a meal together. And this was like randomly at someone's house in the middle of nowhere with no phone signal. And at that point, my Russian was pretty much non-existing. So one of the women at the dinner table started to paint in her notebook to clarify questions she was trying to ask me. And later into the dinner, we were all communicating by painting in our notebooks, exchanging stories about life and love. The day after, I got in a taxi back home to Almaty, where I was living. But just to clarify, so a taxi in Kazakhstan basically means that you just jump into a stranger's car and you negotiate a price. So I was sitting in the stranger's car, driving through the mountains at sunrise, and this immense feeling of freedom just hit me. It hit me that freedom didn't have to mean breaking free from everything. I could still maintain a job and a career, but do it in a way that allowed me to be the full spectrum of myself. So I would lie if I said that working remotely hasn't been challenging. I would say that 2 of the most important skills to attain when working remotely are self-leadership and self-care. To be disciplined enough to make sure that everything gets done, and loving enough to listen to your body's needs. Just want to underline, though, that not all jobs are possible to do remotely, nor are all people a fit for it. So after advising some of Sweden's biggest companies on how to shift from the office to working from home during Corona, this is the free fundamental challenges for us to overcome. The fear of shaking up the how it used to be. Our world is immensely different from 100 years ago when the 9-to-5 was born. The generations that are settling into the workspace today have a different mindset and different values. So it's not like we don't have the tools for remote work. It's more about daring to shake up the old infrastructure and redefine work to align it with the century that we live in. 2, autonomy. Physical presence is no longer an indicator of productivity at work. Why? Because just like me, people want to move through life and feel a bigger sense of ownership over their days, and essentially across a lifetime. So allowing flexibility to an extent doesn't mean letting go of control, because management isn't about walking around making sure people do their work. It's about giving your employees the best conditions to do so. So how do we do that? Anchor into a new type of leadership that is based on trust and not visibility. So what is a trust-based leadership? Let me compare it to dating. So say that you're going on a first date and things are going great. You're not all of a sudden going to ask for proof. Proof that assures you that this person is trustworthy, that this person will be a good, loyal partner to you. We trust until there's a reason not to trust. And we need to adapt to that approach in the work life as well. So in order to work differently, we need a new toolbox. Now, as we all know, the majority of the workforce has been forced into this new way of working without the tools needed to do it mindfully. So when we change the way we work, we need to change the way we move through our days. And one major key here is, as I mentioned earlier, is to cultivate self-leadership. It's to care for your health and knowing when to turn off the computer. It's implementing routines in your life that fulfills your being. It's setting up boundaries for yourself and knowing that just because you're able to work whenever does not mean you should. It's time to create a workspace where people can live in their full truth and not be tied up to an outdated idea of how work is supposed to look like. Many companies today have adapted to the technological aspect of working from home. So now the challenge is to implement a human-centric approach in order to actually create a workspace with longevity. Because a massive revolution is unfolding as we speak. And we're not going back to normal. We are creating a new one. Thank you.